Hi, I'm Daniel. If you're here, you're probably ready to hear the story of how my marriage turned into something I never saw coming. But to explain how it all fell apart, I need to take you back to the beginning, back when everything felt perfect. I met Claire at work. We were both just starting out in entry-level positions at the same company. She was sharp, ambitious, and one of those people who seemed like they were born to succeed. She didn't just work hard. She made it look effortless. She'd walk into a room and own it without even trying. I admired her, and before I knew it, I was falling for her. We started dating after a few months, and it wasn't long before things got serious. Claire wasn't just someone I loved. She was someone I looked up to. I admired her drive and the way she set goals and smashed through them. We talked about the future, about climbing the corporate ladder together, about building something great as a team. A couple of years later, we got married. I thought we were unstoppable. We felt like partners in every sense of the word, at work and home. We supported each other, laughed about our struggles, and shared the same dreams. But looking back now, I can see the cracks forming even then. As Claire started climbing the corporate ladder faster than me, things began to shift. At first, it was subtle. She'd correct me in conversations at work functions, or dismiss my ideas in meetings. The subtle digs weren't confined to the office. They spilled over into work events too. At company dinners or happy hours, she had this way of turning our private life into a joke for everyone's entertainment. "Oh, Daniel? He's great at delegating, especially when it comes to chores at home," she'd say, and everyone would laugh while I sat there feeling like I had been stripped bare in front of them. Her laughter echoed in the room, but I was the only one not smiling. And the thing is, she wasn't always wrong. I'm not perfect, but the way she highlighted my flaws was meant to hurt, not help. But I kept my mouth shut because I told myself it wasn't worth it and that she didn't mean anything by it. But deep down it did mean something. It chipped away at me, piece by piece. I didn't want to look like the sensitive husband who couldn't take a joke. As time went on, her attitude changed. She focused more on her career reputation and how people saw her. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being her partner and started feeling like an accessory, just someone there to make her look good. Our company wasn't exactly a friendly place. It's a cutthroat, competitive environment where people will step on anyone to get ahead. Claire thrived in it. She knew how to play the game better than anyone, and she was rewarded for it. She got the promotions, the recognition, the praise. And while I was proud of her success, I couldn't ignore how it changed the way she treated me. That's when I started to notice the little ways she undermined me and the whispers of a secret affair around the office. Whispers that I tried to ignore for as long as I could. I told myself it was just jealousy. People couldn't handle seeing a strong woman succeed. Right? That's what I wanted to believe. And besides, we were married. We had history, trust, and a life together. I thought I knew her better than anyone. What I didn't know back then was that this wasn't just about Claire's success or her ambition. This was the beginning of something much bigger, something that would destroy everything I thought I knew about our marriage. I'll never forget the night everything fell apart. It was a Friday night at the annual office party. The company had spared no expense. Everything about the event screamed extravagance. The ballroom was lit with shimmering chandeliers. There were glittering gold tablecloths, ice sculptures that seemed unnecessary but impressive, and a live band playing jazz. People mingled in expensive suits and dresses, holding glasses of champagne like it was liquid gold. I remember feeling proud of Claire when we first walked in. She looked stunning in her dark green dress, and I couldn't help but notice how heads turned as she passed. She thrived in places like this, effortlessly charming everyone and commanding attention. I was okay being in her shadow most of the time. It's who she was, or so I thought. The evening was going smoothly enough at first. We made our rounds, shaking hands and making small talk. I stood by her side, offering polite smiles and chiming in when appropriate. It's what I usually did at these things, play the supportive husband. That night, though, I started noticing something that didn't sit right with me. Claire seemed a little too comfortable with certain people, especially one man. He was a top executive in the company, a tall, confident guy. Let's call him Matt. I'd heard rumors about Matt before, the kind of office gossip you brush off because you don't want to believe it could involve your wife. But the way Claire laughed at his jokes, leaned in a little too close when he spoke, it stirred something uneasy in me. I decided to keep an eye on him. Then it happened. The band started playing a slow, jazzy number, and I saw Matt make his move. He walked straight up to Claire, barely acknowledging my existence, and extended his hand. "Care for a dance?" he asked. She didn't hesitate. "Of course," she said with a smile. I told myself it was just a dance. It's normal, right? Harmless. But as they moved to the center of the dance floor, I realized just how wrong I was. It wasn't just a dance. At first, I tried to focus on anything else, but my eyes kept drifting back to them. The way Matt's hand rested a little too low on her back. The way she laughed, tilting her head just enough for him to lean closer. It wasn't playful or polite. It was intimate. They weren't just two colleagues sharing a moment. They looked like two people with a history, a connection I wasn't yet aware of. I watched as they moved in sync, their bodies too close for comfort. I noticed the stolen glances, the soft touches, the way she let her fingers linger on his shoulder. My stomach turned. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong. I decided I had to step in. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the feeling in my gut that if I didn't act, something irreversible would happen. I walked toward them. I tapped Claire lightly on the shoulder. "Claire, can I have a word?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned to me with an annoyed expression, like I'd interrupted something important. "What is it, Daniel?" she said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. I tried to keep my tone calm. "It's getting late. Maybe we should head home soon." Her response? She laughed. A cold, dismissive laugh. "Don't be ridiculous, Daniel," she said sharply. "I'm having a good time. Why don't you go mingle or something?" I felt the eyes of the room on me. Some amused, some curious, all of them making me feel like I was the punchline of a joke I didn't understand. "Claire," I started again, my voice firmer this time, "we need to talk. Now." That's when she snapped. "Daniel, stop embarrassing yourself," she said. "Not everything is about you. Just go." The room fell silent for a moment, or at least it felt that way. I could feel the weight of every gaze, the smirk on Matt's face as he watched the whole thing unfold. My hands clenched into fists, but I didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. Claire had made it clear where I stood. I left the party without looking back, my face hot with humiliation and anger. As I walked out into the cold night air, one thought kept running through my mind. This wasn't just another insult. This was the breaking point. It was the moment I realized things would never go back to the way they were. It was the moment I decided that I couldn't let this slide. Something had to change. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I had to do something about it. When I got home that night after the party, the humiliation still sat heavy in my chest. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the darkened screen of my phone, but my mind wasn't there. I thought about the rumors about her and this Matt guy. At first, I dismissed them. I told myself it was just office gossip, people looking to stir the pot. But after seeing how they were together tonight, I couldn't ignore it anymore. But here's the thing, I was scared. Scared of what I might find if I dug too deep. What if the whispers were true? What if I wasn't enough for her? The thought stuck in my throat like a stone. I didn't know what was worse, the possibility of her cheating or the fact that she didn't respect me enough to hide it. I thought about confronting Claire directly, but deep down I already knew how that would go. She'd twist it around and make me feel like I was paranoid or insecure. She was good at that, turning my concerns into jokes or dismissing them as nonsense. So, I decided to look for answers on my own. The first place I thought to check was her phone, but the phone was always close to her. I waited until she was in the shower one evening, her phone left charging on the kitchen counter. My heart was pounding as I reached for it, But when I tried to unlock it, the password I remembered didn't work. She'd changed it. Frustrated but determined, I realized I needed to look elsewhere. I started paying closer attention at work, casually bringing up conversations about Claire with our colleagues. At first, it was subtle, little comments about the office party or jokes about how the executives act around her. Most people either shrugged it off or changed the subject quickly. It felt like hitting a wall, and I started wondering if I was being paranoid after all. And then one day I got a breakthrough. A colleague I was friendly with, let's call him Mark, gave me a knowing look after I brought Claire up during lunch. He didn't say much at first, just something vague like, "Look, there's a video, leaked CCTV footage. People have been talking about it, but no one wants to get involved." My heart was racing. A video of what? Mark sighed, lowering his voice. "Claire, and you know who. Late at night in the office. Let's just say it's not professional." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me, but I couldn't let Mark see how much it hit me. I forced myself to stay calm and to keep asking questions. Eventually, after some persistence, he agreed to share the video with me. Later that day, Mark forwarded me the footage. I sat in my car in the office parking lot, my hands trembling as I opened it. The grainy black and white video started playing. It was Claire, unmistakably her, standing close to the top executive in the break room. At first it looked innocent enough, just two people talking. But then he stepped closer, and she didn't back away. Instead, she leaned in. The rest of the video was a blur. His hand brushed her arm, her laughing at something he said, the way they stood so close you couldn't fit a sheet of paper between them. And then they kissed. Once I had that video, I knew I had the upper hand. But I wasn't going to stop there. I reached out to a divorce lawyer, explaining the situation in detail. They told me to be patient and to keep gathering more evidence, especially anything that could show a pattern of her behavior. So, I started documenting everything. Every time she insulted me, every time she came home late without a real explanation, every time she dismissed me in public. I wrote it all down and, if possible, captured it on camera/recording. At the same time, I decided to take things a step further. I sent an anonymous tip to HR about the affair. I made sure to include specific details that only someone who knew the truth would know, like the date and time of the incident in the footage. I also sent a similar tip to senior management, just to make sure the information reached the right people. I knew this would trigger an investigation, and I wanted her to feel the walls closing in on her. Now let me be clear. The company didn't have a problem with workplace relationships in general. After all, Claire and I had gotten married while working there. But they had a very strict policy against romantic relationships happening on the premises. And what Claire and her lover were doing wasn't just unprofessional. It was against the rules. I knew the company would take this seriously if they had enough proof. It wasn't easy keeping all of this to myself. There were moments when I wanted to throw the evidence in her face, to scream at her for what she had done. But I kept reminding myself that patience was my weapon. I didn't want a messy confrontation. I wanted a clean, calculated victory. I thought the hardest part of this whole mess would be gathering the evidence, piecing together the lies, and proving what I already knew deep down. But it turned out, the fallout was far more satisfying than I ever expected. Once I sent that anonymous tip about Claire and the executive to HR, things moved faster than I imagined. At first, I thought they might sweep it under the rug. These were powerful people we were talking about. But I guess the evidence was too damning to ignore. Word got out quickly that an investigation had been launched, and it didn't take long for whispers to turn into full-blown office gossip. People started noticing the little things. How Claire and the executive would disappear together during lunch breaks or exchange those knowing glances in meetings. Suddenly, everyone had a story to share, and the floodgates opened. The company took the allegations seriously. Claire and her lover were both put on suspension while the investigation unfolded. And let me tell you, watching her unravel during those weeks was revealing. Claire had always been the composed one, the one who could charm her way out of any situation. But now, the cracks were showing. She looked stressed, her smile strained, her confidence shaken. At home, she didn't say much. I remember sitting across from her at the dinner table one night, watching her pick at her food. For the first time in years, she looked small, desperate, powerless. And in a twisted way, I felt like I was finally seeing the real her, without the armor she wore so convincingly in public. It wasn't long before the investigation reached its conclusion. The company fired both Claire and the executive on the same day. The announcement was cold and impersonal, just an email sent out to staff. But the message was clear: they were done. Their reputations? Ruined. The corporate world is small, and word travels fast. Both of them were blacklisted almost immediately. No one wanted to hire a liability, let alone two people caught in such a scandal. Claire tried to act like it didn't bother her, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She had built her entire identity around her career, and now it was gone. Just like that. And the best part? She didn't know I was the one who pulled the strings. But I wasn't done yet. While Claire was scrambling to figure out her next move, I was preparing mine. I filed for divorce, citing verbal abuse and infidelity. It was all in the paperwork, plain as day. I made sure of that. When she was served the papers, she looked stunned. She tried to argue, to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable. And here's where it got even better. She didn't have the money to fight me. With her career in shambles, she had to dip into her retirement fund just to afford a lawyer. I can't lie, there was a certain satisfaction in watching her struggle. This was the same woman who had humiliated me in public, who had made me feel small and powerless for years. And now, she was the one grasping at straws, trying to hold onto whatever dignity she had left. She knew I had the upper hand, and there was nothing she could do about it. Every step of the process, I stayed calm and collected, while she scrambled to keep up. She had to fight me with money she didn't have. For once, I was in control, and there was no way I was letting go of that power. When the court date finally came, I'll admit, I was nervous. I had spent months preparing for this. She avoided looking at me, which, honestly, felt like a small victory in itself. On my side, I stayed calm, letting my lawyer do the talking. I had spent too much time and energy getting everything to lose my cool. The evidence of her infidelity, the verbal abuse, and everything else she had put me through, it was all laid out neatly for the court to see. There was no denying it. Claire, on the other hand, was scrambling. Her lawyer kept trying to spin things in her favor, but it was clear they didn't have much to work with. I remember one moment when her lawyer tried to paint me as cold and unfeeling, like I didn't care about the marriage, but the judge wasn't buying it. The evidence I had brought was too strong. Her excuses? Weak. When the settlement was finalized, I walked out of that courtroom knowing I had won. I got the upper hand in every way that mattered, financially and emotionally. Claire, though, I didn't feel bad for her. Not one bit. She had done this to herself. But there was one more thing I needed to do before I could close this chapter of my life. A few days after the divorce was finalized, I asked Claire to meet me in person. She hesitated, but eventually agreed. We met at a small, quiet cafe neutral ground. She looked tired. The confidence she used to wear like armor was gone, and for the first time in years, she seemed unsure of herself. I didn't waste time. I told her everything. Claire, I said, leaning forward so she could hear every word, I knew about your affair from the start. I knew you were cheating on me with him. And every step I took from the moment I found out was deliberate. She froze, her expression shifting between shock and anger. But I wasn't done. I'm the one who sent those tips to HR. I'm the reason you and your lover got investigated, suspended, and fired. I wanted you to know that it wasn't luck or coincidence that everything fell apart. It was me. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to process what I had just said. You thought I was weak, I continued, my voice steady. You thought you could humiliate me, tear me down, and get away with it. But I played the long game. And guess what, Claire? I beat you. I beat you at your own game. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at me like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then, without a word, she stood up and walked out of the cafe. I watched her leave. She had always thought I was too soft, too passive, too weak to fight back. But she was wrong. I wasn't weak, I was patient. And patience, as it turns out, was exactly what I needed to bring her down. That said, revenge comes with a cost. I won't sit here and pretend it didn't take a toll on me. The months of digging, watching her lies unravel, and knowing my marriage was built on betrayal, it left scars. Even after I won, after the divorce was finalized and she was fired, there was still this emptiness. Because no matter how much she hurt me, there was a part of me that loved her once. And letting that go wasn't easy. But you know what? If I learned anything from this, it's that you can't let anyone, not even the person you love, make you forget your worth. If you see the signs, if you feel like someone is tearing you down instead of building you up, don't ignore it. You owe it to yourself to stand up even if it's hard. And for the love of everything, don't let fear stop you from facing the truth. It's better to face it and deal with the pain than to live in denial. Now, I'll turn this over to you. What do you think? Was I right to take the long, calculated route? Or should I have confronted her the moment I knew something was wrong? And what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments. I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Thanks for listening to my story.